Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third edition, I would say, of our book club 2000 years ago. As a reminder, we are reading the book 2000 years ago by Emmanuel through the mediumship of Francisco Xavier. And we have a place to debate the ideas and follow along on Spiritism Online. But every Wednesday, at 8 p.m. Pacific time, Pacific Daylight Savings Time. We meet online to discuss a little bit. I know that time zone is not always friendly to folks, but 8 o'clock is what works for us and our family here. And this is, we're originally started as a familial endeavor. We might change that in the future. And here we are, but we're very lucky to have Alex with us. And I also want to say first a hi to Nicole out there. Nicole, you're not in the same room that I am today. What's happening?
I'm not. I feel like you need a little picture of me, like right next to you. It's like, oh, and my lights in my car just went off. Man, this is just all sorts of tragic over here. But yeah, I am living life as all of us, busy, but really committed to this work. And I am actually outside of a children's soccer game waiting to pick up my nephew. But here I am nonetheless committed. I figured if Alex can do this at like almost midnight his time, I can make the effort to like figure out how to do this in my car. But fair warning, at some point I will probably need to turn off my camera because as you notice, my lights keep flickering on and off. And but I've got my book right here, right in my lap. I'm ready to go and excited to be here with everybody. So it's going to be a great night. And like last time, I'm really excited to hear what Alex contributes and what you think about the book and to dive in. So thanks for hosting.
Yeah, and this is a living proof that you literally can be part of this from anywhere in the world,
Indeed.
even inside your car, right? And let's toss it over to Alex. Hey, Alex, how are you doing? Thanks for joining
Well,
us.
thank you one more time to be here. So, well, what can I say? Two more chapters, a lot of stuff going on in the book. Well, I'm glad to be here one more time. I'm alone today at the house. Only my wife is traveling work, so my son is sleeping right now. I hope he's still sleeping well. So, well, yeah. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you here. And you're right, lots of things happening, right, in the book. Today, we're talking about chapters 4 and 5. And chapter 4 is called In Galilee, and chapter 5 is called, ooh, the big one,
Yes.
the Messiah from Nazareth. Um, and so, generally, I think it might be nice for us to start with a little summary. Do one of you guys want to do a summary? Alex, do you want to give us a quick summary of chapter 4?
Well, chapter 4, we stopped chapter 3. They preparing to move, and that big scene that we have that uh, Fulvia and Suspicious planning something that we're not sure what it is yet, but they like finish the chapter there in that point. We start chapter 4 with Publius uh, getting a visit from Flavia. So she's starting her little scheme to get them apart or something like that. We're not sure yet how this is gonna plan out, but they like she's starting like right from the start telling him that to take care of his wife and so on. He got he refused to believe her, but like a little seed was planted on his mind, and he's really trouble. During the chapter, her his daughter is getting worse. They decide to move, and then just after Fulvius' visit, Suspicious and her scheme kind of convince Publius Lentulus to change his plans. Instead moving to Nazareth, to move to Capernaum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing right here, but I think that's
You
the
got
way
it.
it is. And we're not sure yet why they planned that, but well, they moved to Capernaum, following the scheme that both was planning behind their backs. And then with his daughter getting worse, start this his curiosity again to know more about Jesus, and he asked again to Sulpicius tell him the story again about Jesus, and then we stop. I think chapter 4 in that note, right? They're trying to get this. In the middle, we have him like talking with Livia, and they kind of like getting a very emotional point to exchange between the both of them. But it's like he's really troubled about all that is happening and all the feelings that he's getting, and looks like they're really feeling that something is going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm. And it ends
which is why I renamed this chapter. You know, one of my favorite games is to rename the chapters. I renamed this chapter, Should I Stay or Should I Go?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because he's thinking about, like, should I stay here? Should I go back to Rome? Should I go see Jesus? Should I not go see Jesus? So should I stay or should I go? I figured it was the perfect title.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one. And it ends in a very low blow manner. I think he's debating, should I stay or should I go? And what happens? Flavia, who has been listening to the conversations, makes an ask, right? And that's how the chapter ends. But let's dive back a little bit. Thank you for that, Alex. That was great. It's a great summary of what's happening in chapter 4. Chapter 5 is going to be a little different. We'll go into that later. But it does start with a lot of intrigue, right? So Fulvia comes in and starts to, just like Alex said, sow the seeds of discord in Publius, basically saying, you know, I saw your wife with the governor, right, with Pilate. You should really pay attention because, you know, there was something going on over there, and lays the blame, right? That was amazing. And then obviously this is the interesting piece, right? He doesn't believe, but doesn't hate, right? Some of the seeds start to really make up, you know, make some of these interesting thoughts, which I thought it was really interesting because I think it has to do a lot with our own thought process, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we hear an idea and we don't even accept it at the first time, but it kind of just stays there. Yeah. And it lingers and it lingers and it lingers, right? Yeah. Until something else happens. And I think that you also mentioned an interesting point here, Alex, about the Capernaum thing, like why Capernaum, right? I think remember that Fulvia in the beginning, I mean, in the last chapter, had told Tarquinius, Sulpicius, right? You know, let's move him away from the villa of the governor, right? Because that will make the governor more like, my guess is that it would make the governor more like courageous in his advances, right? Would you just make things worse?
Yeah, I did not recall that, but yeah, now makes sense. Yeah.
We should go back and check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, but because it was weird because we do not know yet why they are planning and with this move to that specific city. And at some point, I think it was on chapter 4 that the governor tell them that he is going to visit them in the future. We have more of that in chapter 5. So yeah.
And it's an interesting thing, right? Because just like you said, this move to Capernaum, which was something a little bit different, places them in, for lack of a better term, Jesus territory, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. Nazareth is in that area over there. Capernaum is a fisherman's village, a very simple one, right? I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought it was really interesting that in these 2 chapters, the author Emmanuel spends quite a bit of time describing the environment.
Yes.
Because it seems like it looked very different than it is today, right?
Yes.
Did you guys notice that part as well?
Yeah, I noticed. It's really amazing the way that he describes, because when we think of that part of the world today, it's like he said, we think like a deserted, really desolate area. And
Hmm.
from his the way that he described, it's a totally different place.
Yep. Yeah, right. There's fruits, there's plants, there's lots of things that can be planted. I love how he spent some time in his two chapters as well describing the lake, right,
Hmm.
which we call the Sea of Galilee, right,
Yeah.
nowadays, which was a lot fuller and higher than it is today, so a lot richer, right? And there is a sentence that stuck with me, and I think we go to that later, which is he basically says, I think that's probably the greatest like amount of fish in any other
Yeah. Yeah.
lake anywhere on the world, right? So things are just like in abundance, right? But a very simple place, right? So they move, right? And do
Hmm.
you guys also remember, because they have, so he goes back home or temporary home, talks to Livia, our hero, right?
Yeah.
And they have a come together. He opens his heart, and they sort of like have a moment where it's almost like the negative thoughts that he was building kind of eventually kind of weaken a little bit when he's with her and
Yeah.
he's talking to her, and then she pulls out the harp, right,
Yeah.
and plays this beautiful harp with a song that he wrote for her when they were younger, right? So they really have like a date night moment, right,
Yeah.
where they just spend some time together.
Yeah. And it's curious if you we think back, she always has this kind of influence with him, right?
Hmm.
Like 3 or 4 times already, she kind of, when she speaks and like she tells him something, and we are going to see another moment of this in chapter 5. She got it, like he got back into his senses, what really is, he really is inside, because he has this first appearance of that. I'm a senator, I have to keep my
Hmm.
honor, and he used a lot of these words, right?
Yeah.
He has this face of the official that he has to maintain all the time. And I think if only with hers that he really show what he really is, and what the way he he thinks he should act, because it's always a little off. It's like a struggle between the official and the human being inside of him.
Hmm.
Maybe you can say that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
I was struck by that too, because I feel like there's so much talk about like image and perception and what are people going to think about me and how do
Yeah,
I, how do I come across? I was really struck by that. It comes up over and over again, and it's a great reminder of how we still today put so much value into, how people perceive us, and um, worry more about the external than the internal. And he is
mhm.
like the perfect image of that. So it's an interesting symbol.
yeah,
Yeah, well said. And I think Alex's point is great. Like, we can clearly tell that Livia has a very powerful influence on him, very beneficial, right? The only time in which he really seems to open up his heart and not be worried about it is when either he's with Livia or he's playing with his kids, right?
yeah,
Um, so it's a really interesting piece. But I think your point is great, Nicole, because that hasn't really changed much in different ways, right? From 2,000 years ago, we still struggle, all of us, with this
yeah,
idea of, do I have to keep up this appearance of strength for the world versus do I let myself really be vulnerable and be me, right?
yeah,
That's a current topic that I think that all of us are talking about. There's a lot of attention nowadays, even to work about vulnerability, right? With Brene Brown and all this idea of, if you really want to have meaningful interactions, if you really want to have connection at a human level, you also have to let that guard down and
yeah,
just to be vulnerable to many different ways, right?
yeah.
So no
And I
different
think,
2,000 years ago.
yeah, and I think this is play a role in every aspect of life, right? In parenting, at work, because I always had this like uh, we are afraid sometimes to do the right thing or to act in some way because we think that what other people are going to think. If you're going to dismiss, I don't know the right word here. If people is going to think less of you because you do this or that, right? So,
yeah. And very, very well put. And then I think something else we see in this chapter, which is important later too, is we also see that their group, so to speak, their family group grows by two, right?
yes,
two new slaves that are brought in to help with the move, and right, there's Anna and there's Semele, I guess, Semele or Semele, right?
Yeah.
And we noticed that Semele seems to take on to the kid Marcus.
Yes.
And Anna becomes Livia's right-hand person, basically, right, taking care of Flavia, right? And we also have some conversations. We also see some conversations with Anna and Livia, right, about Jesus. And so we gain a little bit more insight about the fact that Jesus doesn't only talk to the poor, that there are other well-to-do ladies of society that also go see him, right? And there is and she even comes to mention that some of these mothers take their children to see Jesus to heal their kid, right? So clearly we see there a little bit of an influence and a little bit of like, you could do this as well, ma'am, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys notice that as well?
Yeah. That's like she's like kind of letting her know that if it is okay for her to approach, right, to go with her or go meet Jesus or something like that.
Right. What I thought it was really cool in that part too was that as they are talking about Jesus, right, and Anna is narrating all this stuff, there's actually a famous passage that she ends up narrating from the New Testament. She describes that that they came to see Jesus, right? A lot of people generally go and that Jesus generally comes in the boat of Peter, right? From the ocean later in the afternoon, and he comes to the beach and people are waiting for him. And that particular day, there were a lot of kids running around, right? And with all those kids running around, it became a little raucous, it became a little loud. And some of the disciples and other people started complaining about the kids. Hey, can you just put those kids in check? Because you can just imagine the scene, right? Kids like, just, turning it up, basically. And then we have the beautiful passage that we also find in the New Testament in Matthew as well, chapter 19, right? When he says, let the little children come unto me, right?
Yeah, it's on page 77, halfway down the page, if anyone wants to look for that quote. I'll be your quote finder.
All right.
Let the children come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to them.
Yeah, and you guys remember what happens afterward with the children too? The description, which I thought it was interesting.
Well, it said that the children come, sits in his lap, kisses him, and it's a moment of affection between Jesus and the kids and everything. Yeah, and I think he blesses and cures some of them, or then she's saying that more people, other mothers that brought kids that are ill, something like that, and where's the point here? Yeah, the restless little ones run to his loving lap, kissing his robe with indefinable joy. Definable joy. Yeah.
And that's where Anna continues, right? Like the next paragraph, she says, this is the like hint, right? A lot of the children were sick and had been brought to the lakeside by their mothers to be healed from chronic illnesses or incurable diseases, right? So I think that this is the chapter that like Livia really seems to come on board with the idea of Jesus. Right?
And Flavia.
Right. And then
that's a good point.
That's And that's when the really interesting piece happens, right? Because I think you, Alex, talked about like how Flavia worsens, right? All of a sudden, and there's a line in there. I don't remember exactly where he was, but he basically said that they were ready for her to die, right?
Yeah.
That they are like, and he offers to like buy her gifts, right? But they were like, it just took a turn for the worse, and they're just waiting for basically her to. That means that bad, right? They think that that's just going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, right, when he comes to her in a particular difficult night, right, he asks us, "My little dear, what would you like today to make you sleep better?" He asks in a choking voice. So here's the proud senator crying, right,
Yeah.
by the bed, bringing tears to Livia's eyes, and Livia is just watching that as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll find lots of toys and fun things. Tell Daddy what you want, right? So it says, I will have it come from Rome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what does she say?
I want the prophet. Yeah.
I want the prophet from Nazareth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this is interesting how he ends, right? Because I think it's a lot to do with his personality. He says, the senator lowered his eyes, humiliated and confused in light of this unforeseen answer, while Olivia and Anna, as if touched by an invisible and mysterious power arising from the unexpected scene, hid their faces, drenched in tears, right?
Because it doesn't say here, but I think even him, in his curiosity about Jesus, he was thinking about this option, like he's learning about this guy that is curing everyone, and he has this powerful presence and everything. So I think in his mind, he's thinking that this might be a option, right? Because he's trying everything.
Yeah. But I like one word that jumped out at me in that paragraph is like he lowered his eyes, the senator, right? The senator lowered his eyes, humiliated. So why would he be humiliated, right? Because he feels like as the senator of Rome, like one of the most powerful people in the whole of earth, right? He cannot do anything about his daughter, and she's clamoring for somebody else, right? So all the ego that you were talking about before, like he just has to face it, right? In that particular moment, right?
All the pride, all the resources means nothing in this position, right? Because
which is no different than what we have nowadays, right?
Yep.
All the power, so to speak, and all the wealth that we have are oftentimes unable to heal those who we love and who are struggling, right? Yep. So there is the symbolic call for something else, for something greater than the things of the world. So in many different ways, I feel like Flavia's calling and request at the end is like a very symbolic piece of we need to look beyond the physical, right? Yeah. For our wellness.
Yeah.
And that ends chapter 4. Anything else you guys liked there? Thought it was interesting before we go to chapter 5, which is a big chapter.
I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that once again here, it's another moment where we see sort of the slaves, the servants, filling one of the most important roles. I think it was in chapter 2, at the beginning of chapter 2. I'm looking back as I'm here, where the statement is made that
the society is weakening because they have so many slaves.
No, quite the contrary, that some of the most important jobs were given to the slaves, like educating children, raising kids. It was early on, it was either chapter 2 or 3, I can't remember right now, but it's sort of this talk of like the importance of the humble workers. And that's not quite, it's in chapter 2, first paragraph. They said like slaves do the hardest jobs as well as have the most important responsibilities of home life, such as education and instruction. And I think Anna's the perfect example of that she has one of the most important responsibilities, and that is awakening sort of an awareness of Jesus. So I think it's interesting. There's certain themes that continue to come up throughout the book, and this elevation of the most humble continues to be one of them.
And think about this, it's funny if you think, right? Because it says in the book that they brought a lot of slaves from Rome, right? That probably they already know for years. And then they choose a slave that they just met to this important job, right? It's like things getting together, because probably the other slaves does not have the same, or even because of that, thinking in a different way, because Livia was feeling alone, and she will not open her heart like we will see Publius telling her to those slaves she already know. And I think she saw a gateway to befriend Anna in a different way, to open her heart and make her a friendly a person to share some of her pain, right?
Yeah.
Her daughter and everything.
I think that's a really interesting comment too, because I love I asked myself the same question: how come Livia connected so well with Anna, right? And on the description of Anna, I think at one point in time early on, she says that she's basically the same age as Livia.
Yeah, that's true.
So we have they are almost the same age. They kind of click, but it's a very good question too. Like how come it happens that way, right?
Yeah.
And the other thought that comes to my mind too is slaves, right? And I ask, like as Nicole was talking, I was thinking, who are the slaves of today, right? In our society, right? Do we still have people who do that, who take care of our children for us, right? Yeah. While we go to work, and whom oftentimes we don't give great recognition to, right? Yeah. So I think that there is obviously a change over this last 2,000 years in which we don't have those slaves, but we might have people who are slaves to different circumstances, right? Who don't have the same means that we do. And then the question becomes, how do we treat them as well, right? Yes. So I think there's a lot of human issues there for us to think about. Like, do we have quote these invisible slaves around our lives, and how are we treating them, right?
Yes.
But anyways, that's just another topic for us to think about as we shift gears for chapter 5, aptly named The Messiah from Nazareth. And let's just summarize.
Correct, which is why I have no new title for this one, because it just is.
I was thinking that we chose something different.
Yeah.
I did not choose anything different. That one gets to say if anyone ever rewrites the book.
Yeah, that would be a tough one to rewrite. Yeah. But that's the whole idea, right? This chapter is about meeting Jesus, and that is just amazing in itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this chapter, obviously, like we already handed in all the spoilers, right? He meets, Publius meets Jesus. But what I think is interesting is that the next day that after Flavia makes the request and Livia talks to him, Publius agrees, right? So he is going to go look for Jesus, but he's not going to go look for Jesus, right? Yeah. He's going to, like, his plan he shares with her, because he's a senator. He can't be seen looking for Jesus in public, right? Yeah. Again, to what Alex was saying, right? The whole appearance piece of the mask, right? So he comes up with a plan. And what's the plan? The plan is he's going to go to work. And then after work, he will casually, leisurely, stroll down to where Jesus hangs out, and hopefully he'll bump into Jesus.
Yes.
He'll make the request, right?
Yeah. That's his plan.
Huh?
And I think it did not go as planned at the end.
No, right?
Yeah.
No, which is interesting, right? Because like casual encounter. One of the things before even the encounter that I thought was really interesting was, as Publius is walking down, he's really thinking like, but how would I even understand this man? Because, he speaks Latin, right? and these guys have their own dialect, and they've obviously paid zero attention in learning the dialect in Capharnaum, right? Because that's totally beneath them. So he's actually thinking like, so how, if I find him, like how will we be understood, right?
Yeah, and this is a good point for the era, right? Because this is a busy place. There is a lot of roads that people travel through, right? So, and they speak different language.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes because we see movies or see stories, we don't stop to think that a lot of them only know the language that they were raised with, right? So it's not like someone that has access to teachers and that has a way to learn different languages. This is it's still a society that is not like intellectual and not intellectual, but only the rich can have access to those things, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like the regular folk that will have the ability to, or not the ability, but will have a way to learn a different language.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not even a really widespread language, right? It's Aramaic, right? Which is not the language of the empire. It's not the language that you would necessarily learn today, right? It's the language of the humble people that live in that area, right?
Yeah. And then comes to mind how Sulpicius understood.
Well, Sulpicius, he lives in that area, right? So
so
that language, right?
Yeah.
But one of the funny things that I was thinking about Sulpicius early is like chapter 4 is the time when his name should be changed from like Sulpicius to Suspicious, right?
Yeah.
He begins like to act suspiciously, like doing all kinds of shenanigans, right? But the encounter. So I'm fascinated by chapter 5. I got to be honest with you, right?
It's the best chapter so far.
It's one of the better chapters, right? Because how does this meeting go? Because he kind of strolls down, and he's like Alex said, Jesus is not coming, right? And he starts to he leans against like a bench kind of thing. He sits down, and he starts to have this like feelings and memories that are really strong, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like he had when he like when we had these like visions before, right?
Yeah. It's like he's losing perception of the time, the surroundings, and everything. Like so.
Yeah, that's a great point about the time, right? Because he leaves work, so it's like it's evening, right? It's like the sun is almost setting, right?
Yeah.
So that's important because later we'll talk about time, right? But then he starts thinking about like all his. There's a sentence here that I think is really interesting, right? He says. He had never experienced such a feeling except in the memorable dream he had related only to Flaminius, right?
Yeah.
And then the next one, he recalled the smallest details of his earthly life as if he had temporarily abandoned the prison of his physical body.
Yeah.
Right? So he's such a deep state there right now waiting for Jesus, or maybe because the proximity of Jesus, right? That he is able to like spiritually sort of expand a little bit, and he's thinking more clearly, right?
Yeah. And even when you're reading, you kind of like, is he's dreaming or he's really happening, right? This is really like happening, or he's just in his mind and or something different, right?
Yeah.
And then Jesus tell him that yes, it's really happening at a point. So it's
Yeah,
that's a great point, right?
It's fascinating how one of the things I noted was that the conversation between them, starting on page 84 and continuing on, is this encounter with Jesus that he describes as sort of a strange and gentle magnetism. But as they're talking, they're not really talking. So Jesus is talking.
Yeah, Jesus is talking.
Publius is really thinking, and whatever he thinks, Jesus answers, which is such an interesting sort of dynamic back and forth because, he said, what are you looking for, Senator? And then Publius thinks something and he's like, oh, okay. And answers it. It's just the way it's written. It's so fascinating that I had to read it a couple of times because it was just so rich from, starting with the description of Jesus, but then really the dialogue that is not a dialogue, but it's not a monologue. It's just
Yep.
Amazing.
Great point. And that sentence I think is amazing, right? And by the way, it addresses the whole language piece, right?
Yes.
Jesus, like lovingly placing his hand on his head, he asked him in an enchanting language, which Publius understood as perfectly as if it were the patrician idiom, indelibly etched in his soul, the unforgettable feeling that the words were from spirit to spirit, heart to heart, right?
Yeah, and one thing that it's really amazing that he's on his knees.
Yes,
He felt
yes, yes.
compelled to go to his knees in presence of Jesus, right?
Uncontrollable, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Just
And that's big, right? Because again,
yeah,
we were talking about the senator, right? And he feels compelled to kneel by himself, right? As if like a force, like beyond his control, right? So
yep.
he's kneeling in front of Jesus. He's on his knees. A senator of Rome is on his knees in front of a poor prophet from Capharnaum, right?
Yeah.
That is a vision of itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So big piece, because this knees thing is going to come back afterwards again, right? But what I think I really like about this sentence is that Nicole was bringing is like Jesus' first piece is.
I'm going to need to pause here a little bit. But go ahead.
Oh, it was your kid. It was my kid.
Mine.
Oh, mine's acting up too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just a second here, guys.
Yep. So. Yeah, I'm also hearing mine through the. Oh, Nicole, can you hold the fort for 30 seconds? You're on mute, Nicole. You're on mute.
I can hold the fort. I will gladly keep talking because, this is a really cool section. And what I really enjoy about this is just the way that, from Jesus's description to the dialogue of how this goes back and forth. And, I want to point out again, I know I started talking about this a little bit, but it's really this fact that there is a dialogue where at points it says in a flash, he remembered. And then all of a sudden, Jesus really responds to this memory that is happening for Publius. And I'll let the gentleman talk a little bit more in a minute about the dialogue between Jesus. But before we dive into that, because I want all of us to have that conversation together, I think it's important, this theme that we already brought up, which is this Publius felt humiliated and small in the light of his weakness. And he keeps bringing this up. And in the chapter, as it goes on, he continues to point out the weaknesses of others. He points out that not only does he feel small and weak, but he later scolds his wife for being weak. He almost dismisses the humble servant who has been there as sort of weak and inappropriate. That this juxtaposition of this man who has had this amazing experience with Jesus to what can only be appropriately named a jerk who seems ungrateful for it and is punishing people.
Yeah.
So that is super, super fascinating to me. Just the 360s or the 180s that Publius does, because I go from his conversations with his wife, Olivia, where I go, what a great man. Here he comes. He's going to turn it around. To then, boom, he's back exactly where we started. He's dismissing the servant. He is arrogant. And then again, talks to his wife. She calms him down. He comes back to his senses. Olivia is really the grounding force in this. And there's a moment that I wanted to point out. Let me find the page really quickly. I think it's on page 88. And Daniel, just so you know, I skipped the passage and the dialogue with Jesus because I thought you would be a great person to talk about and dive deeper into that. And Alex would enjoy that as well. So we're missing the dialogue between Jesus, but I skipped ahead to sort of the interpersonal piece, which is really kind of my passion, the sociology of, they think that Jesus is an emissary of Jupiter. And Anna really boldly goes, oh no, ma'am, not Jupiter. He is the Son of God, his Father and our Father in heaven. And at that moment, Publius, who I liked up until this moment, just fires back and fires her essentially. It's He's put off by his wife's close friendship with a simple house servant, and says, I do not see a need for you to remain in my mistress's services.
Yeah.
What a dork.
Yeah.
Seriously.
How dare you speak out of turn, right? Is basically what he's saying. Like, who are you to be speaking out of turn, right?
Yeah.
But I love Livia's response. And like in one sentence on page 89, this is something I could see myself saying, is like, what was that, Publius? Like, you know, just like, hello, what was that? Like, what is wrong with you? And it's just such a great moment. And again, once again, like before, and as Jesus mentioned, and I really hope that the two of you discuss the passage with Jesus as I have to hop out in a minute. But, you know, once again, she calms him down, but he's like going like, you are obviously delirious, like just on and on, beating up on her. But then the senator considers the integrity of his wife's opinion. You know, she says, this woman has like helped our daughter, helped me. She's like been here this whole time. Like, she should be rewarded for this, not punished. You know, what are you doing? That sentence again. What was that, Publius?
Yeah.
I feel like that needs to be a bumper sticker somewhere. Like, what was that, Publius?
Yeah. That's definitely a hashtag Team Livia moment.
Yeah.
Right?
It really, really is.
One
and you know, and again, like, she calms him down. He becomes a normal, appropriate human being again, thinking back about his conversation with Jesus. But man, I know both of you have read this book before. As someone who has not read this book before, this feels like, you know, when you read some of these like teen novels where like, is that the good guy or is it the bad guy? Like, is he going to turn it around? Is he not going to turn it around? And I know there's a lot of book left, so I know this is going to happen more, but man, he is getting under my skin, and it is harder and harder to like him. But then at the same time, I love him, his kindness towards his wife. I continue to be on the women's team. Team Anna, Team Livia, Team Flavia. But the men in this book, I don't know, gentlemen. I think I can do without them. But I have to leave you two gentlemen discussing more, because I have a soccer game to attend to. So I'm sorry, but you won't see me in my car anymore. Although I just realized the moon above me. Do you guys see that moon in my sunroof right there? That's beautiful.
That's the moon. I thought it was a light from the parking lot.
I think is it? I don't know. I see a light. Look, it's a halo now. But anyways, you guys enjoy the evening, and please spend some time on that passage and the conversation with Jesus.
We will. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for making the time. And,
bye, everyone.
And I'm also finding very curious, Alex, that both your kiddo and my kiddo acted up at the same time.
Oh, really?
It's a baby. Yeah, I had to jump out too and put my kid back to sleep.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a teen baby going on here.
Yeah, right.
But going back to the dialogue, right? The dialogue of Publius, like when we were talking about Publius being kneeled down in front of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
The things that really, and whispering to his soul, basically, right? Because it's not regular words, because of the language piece. I love the first sentence that Jesus says, which I think is very Jesus, and he says, "Why are you looking for me, Senator?" Right? Which is very typical of Jesus in other passages of the New Testament, right? When he generally, people come to him asking for stuff, and he generally asks them, "What is it that you want?" Right? And this is again another ploy for him to formulate, like, be very clear with all your intentions, right?
Yes.
Tell me what your intentions are, right? And I love the follow-up too, which is so telling in many different ways. And he says, "It would have been better if you had come publicly and in broad daylight in order to learn once and for all the sublime lesson of faith and humility." Right? So, clearly the Christ can read him, right? Clearly, like, as we know, as we have learned through Spiritism, Jesus is such an enlightened spirit that's so far advanced, it's hard for us to understand all his abilities. But not only could he speak spiritually and make himself understood to Publius, he could also read him, right? And understand.
There's no secrets, right?
Right, right. Because his whole incarnation, right? This whole incarnation, if you remember the piece with the dream when he was, his great-grandfather. You're going to come back and you're going to have to make a choice, learn how to forgo all the riches and all the power, right? And learn humility. And here's Jesus again saying, like, you missed the opportunity to do that, right? You should have openly come to me, and not caring about your status in life, your station. You should have looked for me in public, right? Because that would have shown me that you are really ready to let that stuff go, right?
Yeah, and it's amazing that it's not like is speaking in any way in a mysterious way, right? Jesus is speaking like very clearly and very objective, like this is your chance to make a 180 degree to change your life forever. Or if you choose to go the other way, you're gonna suffer, right? So that's the meaning here.
Yeah. Yeah.
After that, we're gonna know that when he dreams again, we go back to this part.
Yeah.
But it's amazes me, like, and I always think every time I read a book that goes, and this book reminds me a lot of we read the Paul's book, the Paul and
Paul and Stephen. Paul and Stephen.
Yeah. It's amazing me because it's kind of the same thing, right? He had an option to go one way, decided goes another way, and then, but it's different because Jesus appears to Paul. Here, he appears to Emmanuel in a way that is like, and he says, I'm coming here because of your wife and her faith.
Yes, that's the slap in the face, right?
But you have now the choice and a chance to make a change in your life. And that's the part that you're saying, that when they say that, like, if you come in the broader daylight, it will tell me right away that you want to change. Because you come at the night, you're telling me that you do not want to change, right?
Yeah. And I think that conversation is so interesting in so many different ways, Alex. I think that I like what you said, because I think that's one of the first things that he's saying. I have not come here because of you. I've come because your wife, right? Team Livy, again, has asked for it. Basically saying, you don't have the merit yet on your own, but your wife has it, earned it. So I have come for her, right?
Yeah. And at this moment, we do not know, but Livy is praying with Anna at the house, right? At the same moment.
At the same moment, yeah. And that's why I think maybe even a little bit before. I think that's maybe what makes him show up.
Yeah,
right?
maybe. Yeah.
Otherwise, he would not have, right?
Yeah.
And so, because he was hoping that Publius would show him in daylight, right, in public.
Yes.
Okay? But when he hears the prayer from Livia, who clearly is an incredible being, right?
Yes.
He goes, right?
Yeah.
And then I like that in the middle of the conversation, Publius also has, again, this moment like, oh my God, this is so different. Am I dreaming? And then Jesus answers him back too, right?
Yeah.
Like, Publius thinks about it and Jesus answers him, right? No, my friend, you're not dreaming, right?
Yes.
And then he goes to exactly what you were talking about. And that's some interesting piece here, right? About Jesus and so forth. And there's so much to unpack, right, in this dialogue that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But basically, he's talking about what you described, which is you need to make a choice. I think all of us need to make a choice between which God are we serving, right?
And at some point, he thinks, like, who is this guy, right? Because I'm a senator and I have all the powers, and he invokes his memories of right powerful Rome and everything. And Jesus just said to him that these are nothing. So this will pass, right?
Yeah. And I like one more piece here too, that I think Jesus like raises the ante here, and says, he says, if faith has established in your house what you regard as bliss because of your daughter's recovery, right? So he's basically saying, like, Publius says, going back, like, you're going to go back home and your daughter's going to be healed, which, by the way, he talked about leprosy before, right? So he said, it is leprosy, right? He confirms it. He says, Jesus continues, Do not forget that it represents an increase in your soul's duties before our Almighty Father. It's like, listen, you're about to get a blessing that you have not earned yet, so to speak.
Yes.
So just beware, things are gonna get harder, right? Because now you got to start shaping up, right?
And I like the phrase before, just before that, I was just reading, I was going to tell you that when Jesus tell him, now go home, aware of the responsibilities of your destiny.
Yes.
So
powerful
now
one.
you know, right? You like now you know.
Now you know, right? You don't
sure.
have any excuses, right? Now you know, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because at our group of study here, I always tell our group the same thing when we discuss here, like, because we study Spiritism, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we are studying, so we are getting knowledge of something that we need to apply and use. So we do not have some excuses that some people have because maybe they are not aware, because some people are not aware. We know that, and it's that phrase got to my it's have a deep meaning for me, because I think a lot about that. Like, I know how I need to be, what I need to do, and it's hard, but we know.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Because everything that we're really talking about here is not just a story. It's a symbolic journey from a man who's telling us, this is what happened to me, right? Remember the introduction, like, let this be like a cautionary tale to you, right? And if you think about it, it's really incredible, right? Because he has had the ultimate, now you know, right? He has met Jesus, right?
Yes.
And it has been such a powerful experience that forces him to knee down, and he can't like move, control, and he's basically a little bit out of body, right? It's such a the presence of Jesus is so powerfully spiritual and uplifting that he's almost like in a different realm, right?
Yeah.
He goes on a little bit more too, right after the quote that you read, Alex. It says like he wanted to leave, right? But just then he saw the prophet from Nazareth transfigured, his eyes uplifted to heaven. So at the end of all the conversation, Jesus basically like unrobes himself spiritually, and he and Publius just kind of has a glimpse of like, it's no longer Jesus, it's something else that Emmanuel doesn't describe, because I don't think you can really use words, right? But it's such a powerful thing. And then he says that, he cries and he's like in the torpor, like just basically, and then he basically like loses time, which goes back to the idea of time, right? It was afternoon when the sun was setting, and then all of a sudden it's 9 p.m. It's when he comes back to his senses, right? So whether it was 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock when he was out there looking for Jesus, it's been some time where he was just like, out of himself, like in this whole different realm, right? So it was an incredible and undeniable experience. Which makes it a lot harder, going back to your point, Alex, of saying, that didn't happen. Right?
Yes. Yes. And but then he also said that he can recall every detail. So it's not like something that when we have a dream and we can just remember parts of it. He has full memory of everything. So it's not that and I think this will bother him so much. And that's why the part that Nicole was saying, that he gets mad when he gets home, right? And see Livia and Anna and his daughter, because he's being all the way from this point to get to his home, thinking about he's kneeling to someone that he think it's less than him, and all that, the things that he cannot explain. And I think that his pride and everything had got him to a point that he wants to refuse everything that he experienced, right? Because his beliefs are totally different.
He's thinking what I call his earthly brain, right? Like, there's his spiritual brain and then his earthly brain, right?
That's a nice,
we all have
way to put it.
right? We all have the spiritual side of us.
Mm-hmm.
Then our earthly brain pulls us back, and we stop thinking with our spiritual brains. And I think that's what's happening. He's justifying everything, right? He gets home, like just like you mentioned. Lo and behold, the daughter is better, right? And he goes and saying, "I shall not admit that her recovery is to be attributed to the magician from Nazareth," right? And Livia again comes to him and has that effect and tells him, I swear to you that, at one point in time, there was a different light in this room when we were praying, right?
Yeah.
And after that, our daughter just felt better, stood up and say, "I'm hungry," which she hasn't eaten, right? And the sores almost basically like disappeared, right? And yet Publius is wavering between his earthly brain and his spiritual brain. And then we have the last piece, I think, which makes it worse and makes you really think about the earthly brain, which is when the slave speaks out of turn, right? And then he's like, earthly brain, right?
Yeah. And if you think about it, and I just noticed that he doesn't say in any point here that he was happy for her recovery.
Right. He's so trapped in himself, right?
He's like, he's just like you said, he's living in this, his brain is working two ways here, that he's not sure what is really happening, right? Until Livia got to say to him, "What is wrong with you?" Right?
Yeah.
Should be like happy, glad that this person is helping us and everything, and he just like go full mode senator of Rome, all powerful, mighty, and you are just a slave and gotta.
Great point. I hadn't thought about it, but it's a great point you raise, Alex. I think you're very right. He's so trapped in his own internal debate, that we don't even have him celebrating that his daughter is back, right?
Yeah.
And it gets worse, right? Because he goes to sleep and he finds himself again in front of that judge, right? That spiritual judge, so to say, that he had remembered from his previous incarnations after he was Publius Lentulus, his great-grandfather. And what does the judge tell him in saying, you had a choice. This was a key pivotal moment in your existence.
Yeah.
And you have chosen your earthly brain over your spiritual brain. And we're not judging you, but just know that this will be painful. There will be a prize, right? Because you've chosen the hardest path, right?
Yeah.
You are squandering an opportunity that very few people have, which is have direct contact with Jesus Christ, right? Yeah. You are going to regret this for thousands of years, right? Yes. Basically.
That's hard.
That's very hard, right? And here we are 2,000 years ago, and he's writing us about that regret.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then I had to think of myself and think like, because did I have this point in life somehow? Because we all know that we are here for a long time, right?
Yes.
So it's hard to be aware of this, right? For him, like, and he says this at the beginning of the book, right? Because that to write this book, it brought him a lot of pain.
Yes.
Because for him now, the way he is right now, to look back and to see that he let pass this chance in front of Jesus, because I do not believe that many people had this chance, right? Yes. To be in front of him and like he's saying, "Hey, come with me."
Yeah.
But he chose otherwise. So yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so so we see him doing that. And the next day, what does he do? He writes a letter back to the Senate.
That famous letter, right?
The famous letter that we had talked about, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we have like inside knowledge here of how things actually happen, like and when they happen, not only about the passage in Matthew 19 about let the little children come unto me, but he also writing on the letter. And then, they wake up and all of a sudden life is a lot better for them, right? The next day, the kid is playing, they're fine. And what happens at the end of the chapter, Quirinius, the slave from his good friend Flaminius, arrives with some news from their good friends, bringing tons of cash as well,
Yes.
right? So all of a sudden, all their life's problems are solved, right? The reason why they've been there in Jerusalem and the surroundings is to have Flavia feel better. She's now is better, right? Whatever public thinks of how that happened or not. And there's no more reason for them to be there. So they say, all right, let's write them back and let's say that we're coming back to Jerusalem.
Yeah. In 1 month, they even say that in a month they will be back.
They'll be back, or will they?
Yeah. Well, now we see, because we got notice too that the governor is in Nazareth
for a visit, right?
And it's like politely requesting, right, their presence.
Yes. So the plot thickens.
Yes.
So I think we can stop right there, Alex. What do you think?
Yeah. I think.
The only thing I am going to say is that next time we talk, we're going to talk about chapters 6 and 7. And all I'm going to say is chapter 6 is called The Abduction.
Yes.
So again, we have another plot twist, right? And it's going to be amazing. And I hope that folks have a chance to read ahead. It's worth reading all the chapters. And of course, if people have comments and questions as well, they can always go to Spiritism Online and enter their comments and questions on the forums piece. That's a good way for you to ask us questions, interact with us if you cannot be here online with us, right? And that will go on even after this course is done. So we'll be there for people if they want to see it. So it kind of stays there. But so I want to thank everybody who's watching, and I want to thank specifically today and always Alex. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure having you. You add so much to the group. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Daniel. And I see you next week.
See you next week. Chapter 6 and 7. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too, man.
Bye.